Hey y'all, Constitution Day is on September 17th, and that means I'm required to spend about a week looking at the United States Constitution. Now, the Constitution itself is all kinds of important, but since this is one of the times when I have a certain degree of freedom to choose exactly which part I want to emphasize, I'm going to focus on the part of the Constitution that I find the most interesting: the Bill of Rights, and the other amendments to the Constitution that grant us, as people living in the United States, all sorts of rights and protections. Most of the original Constitution is more about how the government is going to run. Things like how the president is elected and how long you get to be a senator before you have to run for reelection and other stuff like that. Amendments are changes to the Constitution, and while some of those amendments are along the boring lines of, let's change the rules for how to elect the vice president, a lot of them explain the fundamental rights that our founding fathers envisioned when they worked to create this country, along with a few improvements that they didn't come up with at the time. To start us out, though, I'd like to tell you a story. A story about this guy. His name is Gregory Watson, and as you can doubtless already tell from his photo, he's awesome. To explain why he's awesome, let's go back to the year 1982. Mr. Murray is only 1 year old, but our hero, Gregory Watson, was 19 years old then. He was a college student at the University of Texas, and one day his teacher gave him some homework. His job was to write a paper about the constitutional amendments, and after doing some research, he picked an interesting topic to focus on. Here's a bit of a story inside our story. You know, Congress, the group in Washington, D.C., that gets to make our national laws? Here's a question for you. Who do you think decides how much they get paid? Maybe the president? Or perhaps the Supreme Court? How about Spider Man? The correct answer is none of the above. While I'm sure Spider Man would do a good job, there's actually a very good reason why you wouldn't want the president to be in charge of how much money Congress makes. Congress and the president are supposed to act as checks on one another, and it wouldn't be very good if the president could say something like, hey, if you make any laws that I don't like, you don't get paid. So, who does get to decide how much Congress gets paid? Well, wait for it. They do. They get to decide their own salaries, and they can give themselves a raise at any time that they feel like it. As awesome as it might sound to have a job where you literally get to decide how much you yourself get paid, I bet y'all can imagine how some people might take advantage of that particular situation. The founding fathers thought of that too, which is why they introduced an amendment that tried to close that particular loophole. The amendment said that if Congress gives itself a pay raise, the pay raise doesn't go into effect until after the next election. Basically, if Congress gave itself a stupid big pay raise, voters could vote them out of office before they had a chance to collect on it. Well, that original amendment had been presented to the states, but only a few of the states ever got around to passing it. Usually, amendments have a time limit on getting passed. If they don't get enough votes within a few years, they expire. Gregory Watson noticed that this super old amendment, which had just been sitting around for almost 200 years, definitely wasn't approved by enough states to be added to the Constitution, but it actually didn't have a time limit. And for his homework assignment, he wrote a paper about this amendment, explaining that it could still be passed. For his hard work, Mr. Watson received a big, fat C, along with a comment along the lines of, yeah, right, like an amendment that's like 200 years old could still be passed. He appealed the grade, arguing that he was right, but nobody listened. But this, boys and girls, is the face of a man who would not take a C lying down. For the next 10 years, even after he was out of college, he campaigned for the amendment to be passed. It took about 10 years, but after spending a decade of his life fighting for it, he convinced enough states to back the amendment, and it officially joined the Constitution as the 27th and most recent amendment on May 7th, 1992, more than 202 years after it was originally introduced. He hadn't forgotten about that C either. He tracked down his old college teacher who had stopped teaching and was now working as a farmer, and got her to agree to raise his grade to an A plus. See, kids, if a teacher ever gives you an unfair grade, all you have to do is fight for 10 years and change a part of the United States Constitution in order to prove them wrong. Anyway, now that we've started ourselves out with that story, let's start talking about some of the other amendments, specifically the ones that explain and protect our most fundamental rights as Americans. We'll start at the beginning with the First Amendment. We will not go through every single amendment, just those that talk about protecting people's rights. For each one, I'm going to read the actual text that's written into the amendment itself, and then I'm going to do my best to explain it in regular, everyday language. So, here we go. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This is usually split into three groups. First, freedom of expression. This includes freedom of speech, the right to voice opinions, and freedom of the press, the right of things like newspapers, TV shows, and internet news sites to report the news truthfully. Freedom of religion says the government can't have an official religion that it wants everybody to be a part of. Neither can it say, yeah, that religion's bad. Don't be a part of it. Basically, the government is supposed to keep its hands completely off your own religious business, whether you want to be in one or not. And finally, freedom of assembly, that the people have a right to come together and peacefully protest if there's something going on that they feel the government needs to address. Let's see. The Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This one is usually simplified down to the right to bear arms. This one is one of the more unique ones. This one is less common in other countries similar to the United States around the world, but in the United States, people have a very strong right to keep and own firearms within certain limits, as it says, a well-regulated militia. The Third Amendment. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. In other words, the government can't just put its soldiers into your house and tell you, yeah, you have to let them sleep there. This is one that basically never comes up today because the United States government basically almost never tries to do that, but it was a big deal to the founding fathers. The British government had tried to put soldiers in regular people's houses, so they wanted this right written right into the Constitution that the government absolutely couldn't do that. The Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Okay, this is broken down into no unreasonable searches and seizures. The police can't just pass you on the street and decide they are going to search through all your stuff. They have to have a they have to have a reason for wanting and needing to do that. And a warrant is required. If the police want to search your house, generally speaking, they need a warrant to do it. In order to get a warrant, They have to go to a judge. They have to say, okay, here is why I want to search this house. Here is the evidence I have leading me to think I might find something in this house. And, here's what I'm looking for. And the judge will very carefully look. And if the police do not meet a certain standard, if they don't have a reasonable suspicion to think that they would find something in your house, the judge will turn them down and the police are not allowed to go through your stuff. I think we'll finish up today with the Fifth Amendment, but guys, this is a long one, so buckle up. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. In no particular order, I'll start with no double jeopardy. This means once you have been found innocent of a crime in a court of law, you can never be put back on trial for that same specific crime. Like, let's say the police think you robbed a bank. They've got some evidence that says, oh, maybe you did it. You get arrested, you get put on trial. You have a big trial, and at the end of the day, the jury finds you innocent. Great, you go home. 6 months later, the police find some new evidence that suggests maybe you really did do it. It doesn't matter. Once you have been found innocent, they don't get two bites of that apple. They can never put you on trial for that ever again. Now, if you were to then go out and rob a different bank, or even go back and rob that same bank they thought you robbed the first time, well, they can and will arrest you for that because that is a brand new criminal transaction and you're going to jail. So, but the good thing is, if you can prove your innocence in a court of law, you don't have to have that hanging over your head for the rest of your life. Next up, you never have to testify against yourself. Testify meaning speak. If you're arrested for a crime and the police start asking you questions, you do not have to tell them anything. In TV shows, I'm sure you've seen police begin by going, "You have the right to remain silent." They actually have to tell you that. You absolutely do not have to answer questions if they are thinking that you did the crime. This is also true in a court of law. If you've been arrested and are put on trial, they cannot make you take the stand. If you want to, you absolutely can, but it's your choice. You cannot be forced to testify against yourself. Keep private property. Now, this is like, imagine you have a whole bunch of land and the government wants to build a road through there. They can't just go, haha, we're the government. This is our land now. They actually have to pay you a fair price for it. This happened to my grandparents. They had a huge front yard, but the street out in front of their yard was really crowded and really needed to be expanded. So the government came in and actually took part of their front yard to build the road bigger, but they had to pay my grandparents a fair price for it. They couldn't just take it just because they're the government. And finally, you are entitled to due process of law. They cannot send you to prison without giving you a trial, and that trial has to be fair. Everybody has the right to that, and it's called due process. Okay, we've got a lot more amendments to talk about, but after starting this, I decided, you know what? This is getting long. So look forward tomorrow for part 2 of this video. Until then, you're gonna need the secret word. So, remember our boy from the beginning of the video? The secret word for today is Gregory, his first name, but only use lowercase letters when you type it into the form. I think that's it. Make sure you've watched this video for real. Go into the Google form I've posted, use the secret word, and you should be able to access the set of notes that I've set up. Other than that, until tomorrow, when we'll do a whole bunch of other amendments, please stay safe and stay healthy.